Thank you all for checking out this week's episode. Once again, I'm John. If you like what you heard and saw today, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and check out our brand new merch store with hats, coffee mugs, t-shirts, other cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, thank you all for support. Be safe, and see you next week. How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spirit Talk, and today get to have our wonderful guest, Ramón Colón-López, on the show. Ramón is a retired senior non-commissioned officer of the United States Air Force and a pararescueman. He served as the fourth Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman, most senior enlisted member of the U.S. military. Recently retired, numerous medals, numerous accolades, a long career in the United States Air Force, and someone who I had the pleasure of meeting last year backstage at a Shinedown show. And it's kind of funny because usually when that stuff happens, and hey, the band has to meet these people or they have to do this promo, I always know ahead before the band. And so when I saw your name come across with Mike, I was like, okay, hold on a second. Like, is this real? Like, this is the big guy. And sure enough, you came behind there, and it was just such an honor to like meet you and hang out with you. And it's one of those things where I live in a world where it's celebrities and musicians and people that think they're important, and someone like you that obviously has the career and the longevity and the stuff you've done for this country, where I thought I was gonna feel that way around you, like not intimidated in the way of like not the weird way, but almost like a man, this is a real life superhero, like someone that has done incredible things for this country, and you were the coolest dude backstage. And it was like, again, great to have you here, and awesome to see you again.
John, great to see you. And again, thanks a lot for the hospitality at the show. It was definitely a great time talking with the band, specifically with Brent. But man, spending time with you and the rest of your crew was phenomenal. So we really appreciate it. And my team definitely enjoyed the show.
Well, it's funny too, because like when you were walking backstage and people knew that interview was going on, they're like, "Hey, is he here?" And like normally I'm like, "Who?" Like some guitar rap or some whatever, and like, no, the military guy. Like we know he's here, and it's like it was just kind of surreal to me because it's like I love when people are in tune with like leadership and people outside of our own worlds, and people like you, obviously with the military aspect, the stuff you guys men and women have to do daily. It was just kind of cool. Like it's super humbling, and like our whole camp was like super thrilled you guys were there.
Yeah, and we definitely look forward to seeing you again. And I was just talking with Mike yesterday because I think we're going to be linking up in San Antonio here in the next couple of days. But it's a very, very good coalition of leaders and warriors that we have, and obviously, we're just willing to share anything that we can with society to go ahead and help in any way that we can.
No, it's awesome. And I kind of want to start before I kind of go into like the background of your life. How is retirement like for you right now? Are you ever truly retired?
You never really retire, especially when you're in this high profile positions in government. There's always some work that needs to get done. And what I've come to find out in the first 6 months of retirement is that the pace doesn't quite slow down, but your choices are better because now you're doing the things that you really want to go ahead and put your passion and drive towards, not necessarily the things that you're forced to do. So that is a position that we're finding ourselves now, and man, it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty damn cool.
It's what I've had obviously military men and women on this podcast before, in different ranks, different levels, 4 years, 20-year careers, whatever it was. And I've always been interested in their approach to when it came to getting out of the military. Some people had great experiences, some people had amazing, some had not so great. As if in your terms of your approach to retirement and where you are now, do you think that process is flawed at all? Or like how come some people have different experiences when it comes to retirement or leaving after 4 or 6 year terms where they're kind of like they feel lost? Like I always very interested in that dynamic.
Well, it's funny that we talk about being lost in transition. Well, the best way to get lost is to not know the path you want to follow. So for many of us that actually end up retiring well prepared is because we had a plan years and years ago. We knew which direction we wanted to go. We knew the places where we wanted to live. We definitely knew the industry that we wanted to be a part of once that time came to hang up the uniform. But it's all about preparation, man. It's just like anything else in life. If you have a plan in place and you follow that plan, things are eventually going to pan out. But if you're going blind and you're like, well, what do I do now at the 11th hour? Of course, you're going to have some hardship and struggle.
It's just so it's just when you talk to these people, I'm just very like, to your point, where it's like, if my career, I have to plan so far ahead to be successful at the day, the week, the month. And so, but when I get to the point where I want to retire from the road per se, I got to look at it 3 months out, 6 months out, a year out, 2 years out. Hey, this is my plan in place. Now, obviously, stuff happens, right? Life, war, terrorist attacks, all this stuff happens where it might dictate your flow, how you're going to kind of go into the ether with retirement. But I'm always, so I guess my question is, obviously you're trained and taught and you see through leadership and stuff if you're in the military, but how come some people don't look at the leadership they have above them and around them and be like, man, if they're doing this, why aren't I doing this? Is it tough to get people to lead in that aspect?
Not necessarily tough. I mean, and the best thing that you can facilitate that learning is via providing them a visible example, right? So take our professions as an example, yours and mine. We have very similar paths and very similar things that we need to do in order to be successful. We like to plan well beforehand because we know that our business is all about dealing with contingencies, with curveballs, with the uncertain. So you don't want the things that you should have taken care of, that you have control of, to be distractors when chaos ensues, right? So you do all the preparation beforehand so that way you can react to everything that gets thrown your way. And that eventually becomes a habit in life. And you keep your cool when chaos ensues. You know, you're the person that actually others will turn to saying, hey, what do we do now? He's like, all right, stand by. This is the way that we're going to go ahead and deal with this. But that is really our lot in life. So that's where you and I relate. For the other people that do not deal in uncertainty and chaos as a profession, man, they have every opportunity to have all of their ducks in a row and live what could be a very peaceful life and a very predictable life because they know exactly what they need to do. But that's the problem with most people. Procrastination, bucket list, which I hate, because a bucket list is nothing more than an inventory of regrets when it's all said and done. Because they put it in that bucket and they're like, yeah, one day I will do this. And they never do it. We tend to live like, man, the opportunity is here. Let's go ahead and tackle. Let's make this happen. And it's all about confidence. It's all about courage. And man, so when you exude that as a leader, people tend to follow. You don't have to tell them much. They're just like, hey, wait a second. The old man is doing it. Maybe I can do it too. And then you just coach them and get them along the way.
You've often talked about the idea of the carnivore leadership. Could you kind of touch upon that? Because I love the idea of being proactive as averse to reactive in terms of obviously anything in life, but I love how you kind of talk about that.
Yeah, so this goes back when I was a young E5, basically about 8 years in service. And, I was working with some Navy SEALs, and there was a Master Chief, Jim Hinsky, that always used to say, yeah, that dude is dependable. He's a meat eater. Or, man, that guy's worthless. He's a freaking grass eater. And I was one day, we're just talking. I was like, hey, man, can you tell me a little bit more about that? I was like, well, carnivores are us, man. We're dependable, man. We're meat eaters. We get after it. When the opportunity comes, man, we don't wait. We just go ahead and tackle it head on. And if failure is yours, we learn from it and move on. The herbivore, on the other hand, is the one that is shy. Their fear of failure prevents their actions to take place. And they play it safe to a point to where they end up being those people with the bucket list because they don't dare do anything in their life. And then they're thinking they're going to set it aside. And eventually one day it will happen. But just like we develop habits and a bias for action, they develop a habit of procrastination, which eventually doesn't pan out in their favor. So that is the difference between the carnivore and the herbivore. It has nothing to do with consumption. It is all about a mindset and the way that we actually move on with life, whether it's on duty, personal things, man, this is just the way that I am 100% of the time. Why? Because it's proven useful. It's proven that, it gives you a better opportunity to enjoy life for what it is.
Now, obviously, you've been on missions and stuff where sustaining heavy fire, insurgent, loss of life, just chaos, right? And so that type of stuff there, where if you were afraid to fail, I would assume more bad things would happen to yourself and your team and the mission itself. And it's like, how tough is it to get over that hurdle of, I mean, this go to, I talk to people every day where it's like, I don't want to write that book. I've never written a book before. Well, write it. Well, I don't know. Like, well, if you don't write, you're going to fail. If you do write it, so what if you do? And now it's like, it's the idea of what are you afraid of? And it's just such an interesting concept. Like, I don't know how to get people over the hurdle, because you could, as much as you can be motivated and lead, the people that are listening still have to make the move, to make the jump to that direction. It's like, how do you kind of, is it just continuously showing them and telling them, hey, do this? Or is it letting them kind of see that, hey, I had this idea, it failed miserably, but I still had the idea. But now, because of my failure, we were able to figure out what really is going to solve this issue.
Yeah, it's all about the consequences. If the team is aware of the consequences, if you don't take action, this is what's going to happen. If you take action, this can potentially happen, this can potentially happen. But you also trust that the person next to you is also thinking on the same way about those consequences. What are my actions going to generate? What is my lack of action going to generate? And you let fear be a part of you, because everything is better with fear. All right. It keeps you sharp. But when you let fear overcome you, that's when things go south. That is when you decide to clam up. You don't want to do anything just because you're afraid. I mean, it's always good to stay sharp, but never let that fear overtake you to where you become inactive. Because specifically in combat, like you mentioned, if you do not take action at that very moment, the consequences are fatal. Somebody will die, whether it's you, whether it's one of your teammates, because you failed to act. So it's better to just take action, go head on, than to wait for somebody else to do it and probably witness the biggest failure known to mankind because you didn't do something at the moment.
And for you, in terms of your leadership, and like as you go through your career, are there moments in time where every time you got promoted or there's a mission or something happened where you're kind of like, I have to, like, how many times do you have to rechange your approach to leadership to become the leader you are today?
Every day. So I remember the first time that I actually got a taste of effective leadership, and that was basic military training in the barracks when I got promoted to squad leader. And the one thing that fulfilled me was the sense of ownership. Like, okay, now I've been entrusted with something and I need to make this happen. And then the reason I knew I needed to make that happen was because the guy prior to me got fired and I didn't want to be fired. All right, they entrusted me with this position. Now I got to make it happen. Once we graduated, we were on our flight, which was basically like, all right, you put in the hard work, you get rewards. And the rewards are not personal. That was an entire team of people that benefited from those sacrifices. So then we move on through a military career, first as a logistician, then as a special operator. And it was the same consistent pace. If you put in the hard work into it and you actually include people, you actually take time to grow others in the process, and you never care who gets the credit, good things happen. And then you find yourself in combat and the same thing plays over and over again. So it's just basically a consistent approach to dealing with human beings in order to get them to accomplish a certain goal. And it can be applied to anything in life, really, when you look at it. But it's got to be your genuine approach to it, because if you fake it, people will know it eventually. You only get so much time to fake it before you actually get exposed. But if you're consistent and you're genuine, man, it can work for you for the rest of your life.
Is there an equal balance between humility and ego when it comes to leadership? I mean, I think ego, when you look at people I know in my life that egomaniacs, it's a negative connotation, right? But even in my industry, I have to have some sort of ego. And I don't know if ego is the right word. Maybe it's overconfident or confident. I don't know. But in terms of leadership, humility and ego, or whatever that kind of snowball you have to put together to be an effective leader, like, can you kind of talk about some of the stuff that you have to like kind of put together to be an effective leader?
Well, and I agree with you that maybe ego is not the right word. I will shape it in the context of presence.
Yes.
And presence that is fueled by confidence. Now, because you can be very, very confident, but if you're humble, you're not going to be boastful, and you're not going to be basically presumed as an egomaniac. So the best leaders that I have encountered in my career are what we call the quiet professionals. We're talking the McCravens. We're talking the Jim Minguses. We're talking people that actually just carry on with their presence, and they're willing to back it up by actions, not by words. And that is really how you get people to do exactly what you need them to do in the time frame that you actually set out to accomplish the task. But it is that balance between humility and presence that actually gets you to be that credible entity that people will be basically, they wouldn't want to let you down.
I find it interesting when you say that, because one of your last speeches before you retire, Marine falls out during the ceremony, and you react and do your thing. And it's just like that moment right there just shows you, no matter who you are, where you are, you're always present, and like that command presence and a wherewithal to like jump out there and react. It was the most baller thing, because it's like, this is a guy that literally one of the few people, if he chose to just walk through air and clouds, let him do it. But the fact you're such a human aspect came first with you there. The humility there it's such a rad thing. I mean, it's unfortunate it happened, but the way you handled that was such grace. It was just awesome.
And it goes back to habits, John. I mean, my entire life, I've been running to the sound of the bang, and all of a sudden, this Marine goes down and he hit the pavement hard. I mean, I literally heard his skull hit that concrete so hard that I was just like, this is not good. And I didn't think that anybody else would react quick. And I was about, 50 yards from him, 25 yards. And just needed to get him to safety. But again, it's just one of those habits too. Man, if that's what you do for your entire life, it's not going to change.
Is it tough for you to go into a room with other leaders, whether say you're at the Pentagon or a situation like that, speaking in front of people, leadership, perceived leadership, people, whether they're worthy or not, they're in that role? How hard is it to be an effective leader with other leaders?
Well, you need to be aware of who's in the room and what the agenda is and what is it that we're trying to accomplish. You're also going to have those egomaniacs in the room. So you have to come in with a plan on how to remain your dignity and your humility without being an asshole to them, or coming across as somebody that is combative. Rational arguments was always my go-to ammunition in those particular battlefields. Come with the facts, come with the rational arguments, and always ask why. Why is it? What do we get out of that? And why should we go ahead and take that approach? And some people come heavily laden with their agendas. They want to go ahead and get their win by any means necessary. But that starts tipping into the egomaniac side of things. The rational, patient people, that actually care about the best possible outcome, they will come in willing to listen, and that's part of the humility, willing to listen to see, man, am I missing something, first of all? Second, did I have the best idea or the best assumption coming into this argument? And number three, what can I do to add value if the outcome is in fact favorable for the people that we're trying to help? So always coming into the room with your homework done, just looking into the fine details of the issue, and then being able to ask those questions, making sure that nobody is being swayed by a blind spot, is really where you make your money, when you have a room full of leaders. And I've been in rooms with the President of the United States, the Secretary of the Defense, the Vice President, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, all in the same room, the five of us having a conversation. And that is the same approach that I always took. Not letting the bias get in the way, but let the facts actually drive the outcome.
I know with the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic, with all like the stuff coming out with whether law enforcement defunding and military, all these different agendas, whether they're good or bad, I'm not here to decide that. But it's always interesting to me where I remember growing up. I'm born in '85, and I remember all these presidents and all the conflicts we got involved with, and it never felt like the military. We're all on the same page. It felt like the military, like red, white, blue. Here we go. Support our people. Now it seems like our military has got too political, and I say that knowing the military has to be sent to war. There's different stuff you have to do in the process there, but it seems like instead of letting these men and women lead and do what they know best, they're being led by some people who have control over the outcome of what they're trying to do. And it just seems like, why do we care about a lot of stuff that's happening? Where it's like, why can't we just find the right men and women, let them lead them, and then let's change the world for the better? It just seems the military today just seems over political. I don't know if maybe that's not the right phrase, but from the outside, I look at it going, man, growing up, I remember our men and women kicked ass. Our men and women kick ass now, but now it feels like we're being told to feel one way or another. It just seems super like just confusing to me.
Well, and it is confusing. And if you look at the current landscape, right? So in the past, when we were growing up, media was media. Yeah. You had it for a specific amount of time in a specific time of day. Then you had newspapers, and that's what you were limited to. So you had very little time to get your point across, and people tend to be more brief and more pointed with what they wanted to put out. Then headline news came about, 24-hour, media, basically putting out news. What are they going to do? Are they going to go ahead and fill the 24-hour block saying the same thing? Or are they going to find things to actually keep people tuned in? So it becomes a ratings thing, not necessarily an information thing. And now everybody's got 24-hour news, right? And now you have probably quadruple the amount of outlets that are putting out news, and everybody's competing with the next for ratings and so on. Then you look at the political landscape in the United States of America, to where we're talking back on the Gore-Bush election, which was the closest one to date at that point, to where every vote mattered. That was another tipping point in our nation to where, man, everything matters. Every single vote matters. And people started, specifically campaign managers, started paying attention to that dynamic to make sure that they didn't miss an opportunity to get those votes. The military historically has been apolitical for a lot of reasons, because it doesn't matter who is in power. Correct. We're here to protect the nation. I served under both the Trump and Biden administrations. But what happens when you have millions of votes in the military? Do you think you're going to start trying to play the best person to go ahead and make sure that you get those votes? Do you think somebody's going to say, hey, that administration is not taking care of you? Come to our side. We'll go ahead and give you that pay raise and do whatever it needs to do. And that is exactly what you're seeing in the media nowadays. Now, the military itself is not politicized. You're always going to have political appointees, right? From the Secretary of Defense to some of the key people in there. But that's always been there. And there's always agendas based on whoever's in power at the White House, right? So the military, we have always mastered the way to navigate those waters and maintain combat effectiveness. The problem that we have now today is that overabundance, that constant drumbeat that says the military is not doing this. Under this administration, they could have done better, blah, blah, blah. And now the public is grossly confused. So like, well, wait a second, what the hell is going on? Where I can tell you, as the most senior enlisted person in the United States Department of Defense, man, those troops are ready to go. If the flag goes up right now, they'll go and kick anyone's ass. But we have people continuously beating that drum that, well, no, they're not really the best. They used to be better. No, it's all bullshit. And this is coming from people that have never served a day in their life.
Right.
So my point to all of them, whether it's this outlet or that outlet, leave them alone. They're protecting your right to live a free life. How dare you talk smack about them? Just let them be, give them what they need to go to war, and they will do the rest. And they're the 1% of this nation that is willing to do that voluntarily. So take care of them, man. Don't slander them in public. Don't say that they are this or that without having the facts. And most importantly, don't spin the news for your ratings or for your political party, which is the most obscene, disgusting thing that anyone can do. But I'll tell you, John, they're ready to go, man. And if the flag were to go up right now, hell, I'll be right there with them.
Yeah, it's well, you talked about that. I know recently they're passing these bills and stuff where they're possibly doing a draft again. And like, what are your thoughts on that? And because for me, like, I saw the thing, I'm like, oh God, here we go. And I'm like, well, I'm too old now. But like, part of me is like, when I was doing the Secret Service stuff, like, we'd always joke about, man, if something happened, like, we're ready to go. It's like, I feel bad that I maybe if you could kind of teach me the history of what the purpose of the draft, because I feel bad that God forbid something were to happen, the worst case scenario, and people get drafted and don't want to serve. The people that want to serve but can't, whether it's age, injuries, whatever it is. Like, I wish there was a way you could kind of like in times of need where it's like, John's ready to go, send him in there. Just, I've never parachuted before, but give me someone on my back, I'm jumping in, right? Because I feel bad that we're in a situation where a son or daughter that doesn't want to, it's not anti-American, but doesn't want to serve, maybe they want to serve in that capacity, right? And I feel bad that they could one day be forced into that. So kind of talk me through like the draft process and like, how do you kind of, like, would you be allowed to go back in if you could, or like, how does that work?
Well, I mean, if the need was there and we went to go to the big war, I can almost guarantee that some of us will be recalled back into it, and I will gladly go ahead and put it back on and get after it. Let me tell you something that I witnessed. Before we go into the history of the draft, basically, a draft is a necessity. Just
Correct.
when you don't think you have enough recruits at the time, and you need to make sure that you inform the entire eligible population that, hey, you are one phone call away from actually having to serve your nation. But let me tell you what I saw from September 11th, 2001 on. People that had no clue what the military was all about started paying attention to the news, started seeing their brothers, their cousins, their uncles, their fathers going into combat. And every single one of them, those young people, men or women, were waiting for their time to go ahead and do their part for nation. And you're talking about sports figures, and I'm not talking, about the Tillmans, during this particular conflict, right? I'm talking about the Jackie Robinsons. I'm talking about the Elvis Presleys from back in the day. People rise up to the occasion because there's a national need for Americans to rise up and fight for freedom. And when that flag goes up, man, it's going to happen again. I don't personally think that a draft is necessary because I have seen it happen before. And if history teaches us anything, it's that Americans will always rise up to the occasion. Now, a lot of people are talking about, well, youth is sick nowadays. They're obese. They got too many issues and so on. Well, we were in the same place back after the Korean War. After the Great Depression, America was in shambles when it came to the health of our people, but we rose up, right? We started doing things better. We started getting institutionalized programs to make sure that we ate better, that we had better physical fitness, and eventually warriors were bred out of that. Now we have an entire generation that fought for 2 decades, including multiple Medal of Honor recipients that are alive and with us, that are willing to teach this next generation what it takes when the flag goes up. So in my opinion, I don't think that a draft is necessary. I'm thinking that if there's a need, and eventually the news outlets start talking about the goodness and the honor of serving our nation versus the negative shit that they're putting right now, and our youth is going to rise up for it. Part of it is the narrative that is out there, that if you come into the service, your daughter can end up like Vanessa Guillen and be raped and killed. If you come into the service, you're going to be forced to work with transgender people. You're going to be forced to do X, Y, and Z. And that is the narrative that they're putting out there. If they were to shut up about that stuff and let the Department of Defense do what the Department of Defense does, which is fight the nation's wars, we'll be much better. Yeah. But that narrative is eventually going to change, and you're going to get to see our sons and daughters rising up to the occasion and raising their right hand. Why? Because there's a need.
It's your point with the media. I know, especially my law enforcement friends, defund the police the last couple of years, everything they went through. Mm-hmm. The issues they always talked about was not only the defunding and recruiting, because now people are getting slandered by their own leadership, their own mayors, their own congressmen, whoever they are, and then the idea of, well, if you don't get vaccinated, you can't be a cop. Well, now as stuff comes out, and again, we don't have to get the political behind this stuff, but people realize that, man, maybe we should have trusted the science a little bit better. And then now we don't have people to fill up our police barracks, because no one wants to go. If I want to be a cop today, and I'm a 17-year-old, 18-year-old going through college, and I watch the news every night, you're attacked every night. And it's always, so it's your point. I know people in the military, if you're not vaccinated, like you have to retire early, you can't do this. And I know it scared off a bunch of people. So, but how does the military kind of take a step back and like the recruiting process? Is it them realizing there's people like you, and obviously there's hundreds and hundreds of leaders and great people in the military, right? And so is it them getting access to people like you saying, you know what, this is for me? Like, how do you? Because I think sometimes when you go to recruiting, it's always a dollar sign, and not like you're not there for the right reason, if that makes sense. Because I don't know, it just seems so. It just seems abrasive to me.
Well, so we're always, the military is always going to be under civilian control, as you know, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So they're going to make the decisions, then they're going to go ahead and put the law into place, and then that law is eventually going to trickle down. The one thing that I require every single military person is to obey lawful orders. Those are not up for debate, and they're not suggestions, they're orders. You either follow or you get out of the way. It's that simple. And that is part of the military discipline that we expect on the battlefield. Now, the vaccine was one of those cases to where when it became a federal mandate, the gig was up. You either follow suit or you
right.
had to go ahead and part ways, right? Or get a waiver for whatever reason it was. So there were some mechanisms in there. Our position was always, because the force was fairly healthy, even at the height of the pandemic, not to make the vaccine mandatory. But once the administration decided to make it a federal mandate, and we're talking Trump and
Yeah,
Biden administrations,
right.
because this actually ended up being kind of like the baton was passed on once the vaccine was done. But when we were told, hey, it's a federal mandate, you couldn't debate it. I mean, what are you going to do? Protest in the military? No, man, that's not what we do.
Right.
We follow orders. So, man, I was just like, all right, pick the arm. I need to serve my nation. If this is what it takes, then so be it, right? Same thing happened with anthrax back in the
Yeah.
mid 90s. And that wasn't even FDA approved. But nobody's talking much about that, man. And
Which is
that was
weird.
probably, yeah,
Yeah.
it is weird. It's a weird dynamic. But it always goes back to the narrative and the abundance of that narrative being put out there. COVID, you couldn't basically flip an article, a page on Facebook, on LinkedIn without something COVID. And then the conspiracy theories will come about. And then that starts feeding people's minds. Oh, well, I'm Catholic, so I'm not going to do this because it's got baby cells and everything else. And it's like, oh, and then people eating babies. I mean, it just gets out of hand. But then when you start looking at, the rational argument, it's like, all right, so there is a mandate, it's a federal mandate. You either do this or you have to get out. What are you going to do? You have a choice. My choice was like, I'm here to serve my nation. I'm here to follow orders. The chairman did it. I did it. As a matter of fact, when the vaccine first came out, the first dose went to President Trump, I think. Second dose, Vice President, then Secretary Esper, Mark Milley as the chairman, and me. I was probably fifth or sixth in line to get the vaccine once it actually was put out there. Part of it was because somebody that was in the construct,
Leadership. Yeah.
Operation Warp Speed, General Gus Perna, said this is about as safe as any other vaccine that we have. And I trusted the guy. So, man, I had no issues getting the vaccine, right? And the other part of it was to go ahead and let young people know, hey, I'm doing it. It's an order. Come on, guys. We need you in the rank and file to go ahead and fight the nation's war. But again, it's yet another one of those instances where this got so out of control and so politicized that maybe it became a pain in the ass for us. We were dealing with this for like freaking 8 months, like with the vaccine mandate. But our position was not to make it mandatory, and just have it in there just in case we needed to go to certain places. But, once the federal mandate came out, man, the gig was up.
Yeah, it's some of the military people I know in my circle where we always laugh about that because they're the same questions where it's like don't make it where you have to get it, but like it's available, right? But they'd always be like, John, the shots we were getting Desert Storm, and like we don't know what we're being shot up with, whether it's malaria, yellow fever, all this other stuff where it's like the stuff we got put in our bodies, that's the bigger issue we're talking about here, because all the stuff we were put in our bodies is now we're dealing with it 20, 30 years later. And it's like it's such an interesting, like to your point where it's if you're there to serve, then you do what you do what has to be done to serve.
And nothing that is man-made. I mean, from the food that we eat to the supplements that we take to go ahead and build muscle, nothing is 100% safe. But we tend to pinpoint what is most important for us right now. And part of that is just the societal pressure on the particular subject.
When you talk about moral courage, what does that mean to you?
Well, It just means that you have a solid foundation to go ahead and basically stand by your principles and do what is right, regardless of the situation.
Is it a, have you found that approach to leadership, is it been difficult even when you've been in a room with a president, Homeland Security, whoever it is, where you and one other person might have one idea and everyone else disagrees, and like, how is it? Like, do you ever in those moments ever feel like, man, am I doing the right thing here? Like, how is your moral compass? How often does that kind of swag in the wind a little bit?
Well, my moral compass. I mean, if you were to ask the people that actually have served with me, that have known me my entire life, it's always pointing north. And I have a reputation for calling bullshit out in rooms where everybody's shaking their head. Yes, I was like, wait a minute, no, 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 no. What about this? Are we going to address this? And what is good about that? What is the benefit that our people will get if we decide to do that, other than for you to kiss somebody's ring? And a lot of people have agendas, man. Everybody's just looking for the next promotion and everything else. And it's always good to have someone or some people in the room that will actually just call bullshit for what it is. And that was my entire tenure as a senior enlisted advisor to the chairman at the Pentagon, with some very strong allies to be able to just say, hey, look, that's bullshit. Why are we doing that? And if you do that and you press with it the way that you're doing it, this is what you're going to get from the force. And by the way, don't expect me to say, well, it is the way it is, because, man, there's another way, a better way to do that. Unless it's a lawful order, you're going to get some resistance on that
one. Is it like, because I'm always just like, it's such a tough thing. It's like, it seems so hard to go against the grain and have stand up for your morals, right? It seems so easy to shake your head, like you said. It's like, I don't get why people just feel so, like, is it because they're afraid of the work? They don't want to do the work. It is work that they don't really kind of be like, hold on a second, why are we rushing? Like, let's do this. Let's figure this out the right way. I just hate, like, and I could never be in a room, but when I get in those situations where I'm talking to people like that, they're just, oh yeah, we'll do this. Like, I've been in like these kind of icebreaker type of situations where different leaders, different industry will be in a room. The person talking, leading the class, will a bunch of great things, and it will throw in the most asinine, doesn't even make sense. Why? Just to see a test, and there'll be people like, yeah, no, I agree, all this stuff. And be like, do you hear what I just said? And then a couple of us will kind of look back and be like, well, wait, what? What? It boggles my mind that people don't have the energy or the wherewithal to like put their feet down and be like, hold on a second, let's do this the right way.
Well, and those are typically the same people that will just sit in a room, and if something happens, that will just stand back to see who else takes care of the issue. It is the same way. Again, it's just a habit. If you have the habit to, it's like, man, that didn't really, let me make sure that I understand what you're saying. And let me go ahead and provide you a counterpoint just to make sure that your assumptions are correct, right? So if you have the courage and the strength to be able to go ahead and have that conversation with people eyeball to eyeball, you will be that person in the room that is going to actually go ahead and call bullshit when bullshit needs to be called. Doesn't matter who the person is. Never matters. I've done it to the president, both of them myself. And man, it's a necessity, but somebody has to do it. And what I always tend to see after the fact is, man, I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking it, but, I'm glad you said it because it needed to be said. And I was like, didn't you freaking say it then, But you're always going to have those people in the room, man. A lot of them are thinking it, but very few of them will have the courage to actually just say it out loud.
Right. Do you think a lot of that courage and your type of approach to life and leadership stems from your upbringing in Puerto Rico, whether through poverty and then then you moved to Connecticut? And it's like, do you think that how important is your upbringing into the shaping of who you are today?
Upbringing definitely plays a lot. And my upbringing was of the have-nots, and grew up with limited resources. And man, you had to fend for your own, right? So everything had meaning. And especially when you attained something, it had a lot of meaning because you had to work for it. That eventually taught me to respect the position that I have been given and the opportunity that I have been given to do something, whether it was in the military, whether it was in a routine job or anything else. I was entrusted to do something, and I respected that position and what was expected of me. It is that respect that actually gives me the courage to do what I need to do, because I don't think that I will be able to get sound sleep if I pass an opportunity to say something critical that can potentially change the outcome for the better and let things play out and watch the disaster unveil. That has never been me. But a lot of that has to do with, yes, the upbringing, just like, hey, man, you only get one shot to make this work. And if you can change or shape the outcome based on rational facts and your input, how dare you pass up that opportunity? You don't do that. Your time on this planet is limited, specifically your time in certain positions. And you have to make sure that you live every day wanting to make the most difference that you can in order to go ahead and make sure that you leave the institution better than how you found it.
And so, how the jump into the military, because you go to college for biology, like how does that even go from wanting to do that type of career to, okay, now I'm going to the Air Force? Like, what was the trigger for that?
Well, I always wanted to be a doctor. That was my dream job since I was a little boy, because I wanted to fix things. I wanted to fix people, and find out that I'm not a very good student. I had the attention span of a flea, and man, I just had too much energy, and I wasn't academically inclined. So when I graduated high school, went to college, tried the college thing, and decided to enlist because education wasn't the priority for me. I needed discipline and independence in my life at that point. So I chose that path. I was just like, I'm going to go in the military. I'm going to go ahead and get these things, and eventually I will get my education and find out my purpose in life. And the rest is history. I came in the military, got exactly what I bargained for, then became a special operator. That defined my purpose in life. And culminating that career as a senior enlisted advisor to the chairman was a cherry on the cake. That was unexpected. That was not part of the goal. But eventually, these things happen just because of your credibility and your reputation. And that is really where life took me. And man, I could die tomorrow. I'll die happy, man.
That's awesome. And so I know when you and I have talked, like off the record and stuff, about firearms and training and all that stuff. It's like, is when you go out public today with your family by yourself, like how in tune are you with like what could happen type scenarios in a restaurant, in a mall, in a movie theater? And obviously we live in a crazy world today where anything can kind of go off, active shooter type stuff. Like, are you so in tune with that? Like, you always have to kind of like position yourself the right way at a restaurant. Like, how, like, I know some people that, like, if it happens, I'll react and do my thing. But there's also some people that are very much like, okay, when this happens, this is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to do. It's like, I always find it interesting talking to people like yourself about this.
Well, you're eventually going to meet her, but you need to meet Janet. She's a better shot than I am. So Janet knows that I will never put my back to a door. Janet knows that when I'm sitting down, I look where the bathroom is, I look where the exits are. Janet knows that I'm always paying attention to people, and she's the same exact way. We're two peas in a pot, man. But I'm always in tune with it because, again, most people live their life, in the white zone. I'm always in the orange, and I'm always in tune with somebody that is acting erratically. I'm always in tune with what can potentially go wrong, because I know that the moment to react is going to be very, very minimal. And, I just don't leave things to chance. And I have seen a lot in my life, and I have had enough training to know better than to go ahead and bury my head in the sand along with the others. So I'm always watchful, but not to a point to where I'm paranoid, but I'm always in tune when it happens. And if for some reason I'm having a lapse, man, I know she's got my six, because
Right.
she's exactly the same way. Yeah.
Right. And it's like with my industry, everything from the Bataclan in France to Manchester bombing, to Las Vegas shooting, that type of stuff happens, unfortunately. It's always interesting when people are, you kind of look at some of the stuff has to happen for it to now become a training exercise to prevent it from happening again. And I think I think law enforcement, military, whoever, private security, they do a great job at making sure it can't happen again. But it's always interesting where it's like the bad guys are always figure out a way to do something worse. Or now we figure out how to stop a Las Vegas type shooting. Now we're going to do a whatever type shooting. It's just like, how do you feel? I mean, obviously with the military when you're there, but even now, where it's like, how do we as a society kind of just like you said, figure out how to collectively all get in the white zone and just operate at a level where to stop the stuff from happening? Because you could there's been case studies where you do scenario training where if you see a guy 100 degrees out pacing himself in a winter jacket out there, the amount of people that don't approach that person or tell someone of authority figure, hey, this looks kind of weird, it's astounding to me. It's your point. It's like if you see something that out, like we're so like stuck, we cross the street on our cell phones, we're not paying attention to the world around us. It's like it's so frustrating because I think a lot of the stuff, whether it's massive stuff or small stuff, is easily avoidable if someone just does the right kind of like, hey, there's an issue here, I'm gonna tell someone.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem with society nowadays. Everything else that is happening outside of our bubble is somebody else's problem, not my lot in life. At the same time that people are calling for defunding police and this and that, man, you're taking out of the equation the good things that can potentially respond to a lot of these bad things that are happening in society. And I think that the public has got to get in tune with the fact that we are always going to have bad people. Bad people are always going to find a way to get a weapon. Bad people are always going to find a way to go ahead and do what they need to do, unless somebody stops them before they do. And that has always been, throughout the history of our, of our nation. There's always been an opportunistic person that wants to do something that, if the conditions are set in their favor, they will go ahead and go through it. But not many people are talking about the many times to where those same people actually approach someplace and they're like, not today, because I know that that person out there is on guard, that person is on guard. So there's got to be some kind of deterrent in place for those people to know that, my chances of success in this particular venue are not going to be good.
Right.
If they're comfortable with it, they're going to go ahead and press with it. But if they're thinking that their plan is going to unfold before they even actually get to where they need it to be, they'll think twice about doing it.
Like obviously you left at a time where there's the conflict in Israel, Palestine, you got Russia, Ukraine, and obviously there's conflicts happening every day in the world that the military is involved with, or at least knows what's going on. And so I'm kind of like, for you, the mental health aspect of the job you had, and even any type of leadership or any man or woman in the military, obviously there's a stigma attached to that. But for someone like you, who has openly talked about the need for mental health reform and look after one another and get the help and don't, if I ask for help, doesn't mean I can't serve type stuff. And it's like, when that's going on, like you throw the media on top of that and then your own people and your own leadership around you that, like, how does someone like you decompress to the point where it's like, it's like where you can feel like you're healed mentally?
Well, there comes a time to where, regardless of the profession, right? So take a welder as an example. Their vision is bound to go bad because of what they're experiencing. They know that it's going to come, and eventually they prepare themselves for what's going to happen in their later years, right? For any warrior that is bound to be exposed to combat, you have to expect it, that there's going to be some baggage that actually comes along with it. And that is not a bad thing, as long as you're accepting it, that this is part of who I am. This is what I need to do. And when the time comes, I have to be comfortable and confident enough that I can get the help that I need. That was the part that was missing for the longest time. Not only for us in the military, but for law enforcement as well. To where if you came forward, they put you on ice off to the side until they try to figure out what the hell they were going to do with you, right? And nobody wanted that badge of, man, you're a sissy because you actually said that you had issues because of what you saw. When a lot of them were experiencing the same thing. They either tried to drown it with alcohol, they had some other mechanisms to go ahead and deal with it, but none of it was good as it could have been if they had the proper medical help to do that. The good thing that we have nowadays, John, is that there are so many avenues to deal with this stuff, man. And, Mike and I talk about it continuously, and Tim Kennedy and a few others, about what is the next step that we need to take to make sure that this is normalized, because it's going to be a part of us, regardless of generation, regardless of duty. If you are put forward in a combat environment, you're bound to see something that is actually going to go ahead and fracture your foundation. How do we patch that up? And how do we keep you functional to be able to continue to do that? And then the last thing with it, with the stigma, is society, thinking that, well, if you serve in the military, you're going to be a drunk, you're going to be angry, you have, the potential of committing suicide and so on. No, man, that's not the case either, because we have so many people that are still providing so much to society based on the lessons that we learn, that it's still much better than some of our members in Congress and the Senate, and we are functional people. We have functional people that have a vast amount of experience that very few get exposed to. And we want to impart that experience into the next generation to make sure that they're better prepared than how we were. But there's no shame in actually seeking help when it comes to it. And it's a good thing. It actually helps you come in tune with yourself and what you have, and actually motivates you a little bit more, because it shows the amount of sacrifice that you have put forward in your life and how very few people were willing to do exactly what you did.
Right.
So there's a lot of negative that is obviously overshadowing the good that comes with this. And I'm telling you that I'm proud of everything that I have done. I'm proud of the people that I have served. And I'm proud of getting help, because it's helping me, it's helping my family, and it's going to help me help the next generation move forward with this.
So I love that. And before I let you go, could you kind of talk about the things that you and Mike are working on, the organization, how people get involved, if they want to reach out or have ideas, like how do they go about doing that?
So there's a lot of organizations that we're working with. I am personally a board member in the Robert Irvine Foundation. And with the Robert Irvine Foundation, we found ways to go ahead and keep veterans focused post-combat on the good things in life, the way that we used to be, to actually overcome that hump of darkness. The other thing that we do is we find a lot of opportunities to go ahead and say thank you to the family members that have sacrificed just as much as the member on the battlefield, right? There's also a lot of other organizations, like the Navy SEAL Foundation, we have the Pararescue Association, the Combat Control Association, just to name a few, that are actually putting forward events in order to go ahead and help members and their families, especially after post-conflict, to be able to make sure that we're staying in tune with our tribe and that we stay connected with the people that we admire the most. Another one is the All Secure Foundation, run by Tom and Jen Satterley, who is a former Tier 1 operator, Delta Force guy. So, I mean, there's a ton of places out there that are willing to help veterans. The one thing that we're asking all of those organizations to do is to quit victimizing the military members, the veterans. It's not poor them, or, they no longer can't do that. Let's appreciate what they have done. Let's provide an opportunity to have fun now that they're not fighting anymore. That's the positive spin that we're actually putting into this, because it's really what we owe them. We do not owe them pity. We owe them opportunities to make sure that they continue to thrive in life and move forward with the honor that they have carried on the battlefield as a member of society nowadays.
I love that. Yeah, again, when I met you and Mike backstage at that show, it's very rare to meet people that actually care. Like sometimes you see people that are like the face or they work in the organization, they're kind of there to kind of maybe check that I, dash that T, whatever it is, to kind of like, oh, but obviously with you two, that you actually care, you've been there in these positions and stuff. And it's like, again, it was super rad, and I can't thank you enough for everything you've done and everything you're gonna do.
Man, and thank you, John, for having a forum like this to be able to have, good, candid conversations. I think that we need to have a lot more of these in society and just call things for what they are. Don't be swayed by the overly, consistent narrative or whatever the topic may be. Take the time to go ahead and look into the details and see whether they're selling you bullshit or if they're actually, going in a direction that you should listen. But we need to get out of the habit of being sheep in this world, and we need to be on our own, trying to find our own conclusions, because the most important thing that we can do as a society is take individual responsibility and control of our own lives. Whatever happens in society is going to happen. But if more people will work to do that, instead of looking for a handout, waiting to be victimized and so on, if we take responsibility for what we own, our immediate family, our house, our duty, and the amount of worth that we have towards society, I think that we will be in a better place at some point, man. So, man, anything that we can do to do that, it starts in places like this, having these conversations with you, and man, open to talk at any given time.
Thank you, sir. Oh, hello. I'm just enjoying this nice fucking candle. Anyways, I'm John, the host of Spear Talk, and I want to talk to you about nice fucking candles. We are lucky to have Nice Fucking Candles as a sponsor of the podcast, and if you use code SpearTalk15, you get 15% off your first order, or use the affiliate link below to always get your candle needs through Nice Fucking Candles. Nice Fucking Candles are 100% soy wax. They have a 65-hour burn time, maybe more if you nurse the flame a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not an expert on flames or candles, but I will say these things burn a long fucking time. You ask me about the wick. It's a double wick for even burning, which is amazing. And they come in 3 incredible flavors. I'm not sure if you're going to be eating these candles, but if you do like them, the scents are eucalyptus and ginseng, tobacco and fireside, and seaside and driftwood. Once again, Nice Fucking Candles. They are the candle company for Spear Talk. And if you love candles and need a good scent to clear out your office, your room, your podcast room, your weight room, your whatever you're doing in a room that smells like crap, use this candle. It's amazing. Thank you. Check them out. Love Nice Fucking Candles.